Hey, what's up guys? It's Jake aka Tag, and today we're back at it again with the very best mortar bait deck in the entirety of Clash Royale. Igor has hit number 1 and 2 in the world on multiple accounts with this mortar bait deck, and he is cruising up the trophies, over 8,000 on multiple accounts. This guy is insane. He's had multiple number 1 finishes before, and there is no one better to learn mortar bait from. So luckily enough, we have a couple replays of Igor playing at over 8,000 trophies at the top of ladder. So let's go jump straight into some games and learn a lot about mortar. So we're gonna go jump right into our very first game. It's gonna be a mortar versus mortar mirror matchup, and it is gonna be a very difficult matchup if you do not know what you're doing. So let's see what Igor does and how he actually navigates this matchup. So first off, he's not dropping anything. He doesn't know what his opponent has. He does not end up having spear goblins, so he would typically cycle those at the river. I've seen him do that a lot. He just holds the goblin gang when he doesn't actually have any other defenses to bridge spam. So if you don't have rascals and you only end up having goblin gang, miner, zap, and fireball, you probably don't want to cycle your goblin gang, because if your opponent drops a bandit, then you're forced to drop like a miner on defense. So as you just saw right there, Igor does not cycle the goblin gang if he doesn't have appropriate defenses in hand. He's going to go for a zap immediately right on top of the bats, and he's going to get a ton of extra damage with the miner. So we're going to see how he plays this matchup, if he's going to play it offensively or defensively. So far, he's played it pretty offensively when he knows that his opponent can't punish him for it. So we see a musketeer going down the right-hand side. What will Igor do here? Will he drop bats? Will he drop rascals? We have to wait and see. So we see a rascals in hand. We see a defensive mortar come down. So the reason why he doesn't end up dropping rascals immediately is if the mortar targets the thick boy and hits everything, the girl rascals die, and then your entire push and your entire counter push is stifled. So as we just saw, Igor used the defensive mortar to soak the shots from his opponent's mortar, and then immediately after, he ends up dropping his rascals. One of the things that I've noticed from top mortar bait players, they never end up dropping rascals on defense against mortars unless the mortar's either locking onto something else or it's locking onto their tower first. They would actually rather wait a couple seconds so the mortar locks onto the tower, opposed to losing the entirety of the girl rascals and then not being able to kill the mortar anyway. So make sure that when you're dropping your goblin gang or your rascals, you're not allowing the mortar to kill it immediately. That's a big thing that we're going to see here time and time again. Igor is going to use the defensive mortar. He's going to soak up shots. He's going to chip away with the miner on offense. And then he's going to end up dropping spear goblins or goblin gang or bats or whatever he needs to finish off the opponent's offensive mortar. So that's the template that you guys are going to want to follow in this game. Just take a look at what he does. So a mortar is actually going to come down now. We're going to see the goblin gang actually implemented immediately, and he's going to get a lot of hits off on top of that mortar. So that was actually really well played, because his opponent did not have enough elixir. He was able to play really aggressive with the goblin gang. He wasn't going to drop spear goblins there because the spear goblins would actually die, but since the goblins from the goblin gang were able to get on top, it was fine. So Igor is going to go for the defensive mortar, and as we see again, he's rinse and repeating the same strategy. He wants to make sure, if he can afford to, he's going to have a defensive mortar there, but unfortunately, like, it was really bad timing before where his opponent goes in for an offensive mortar at the same time he does, so there really wasn't anything he could do there, and then the goblin gang was able to deny all but one hit. So it was still really good. This is a commanding lead, and as you guys can see, he ends up waiting for the mortar to go connect onto his mortar. He drops spear goblins, and since he has the damage lead, that's kind of how you secure the game. You just cycle with miner chip, and then you allow your mortar to just soak up your opponent's shots, and they can't really do anything. So this is really well played by Igor. As you guys can see, now you have a template going into every single mortar mirror matchup. If you get an advantage, all you do is just drop your defensive mortars in a range where they can't fireball it. So say his opponent ended up having fireball, he would drop it a little bit further off to the right-hand side or the left-hand side where the weaker tower isn't. And then he would be able to get more chip damage on his opponent by just miner cycling, because he would be safe and sound, making sure that his opponent always has his mortar lock onto his. Very well played by Igor. Let's move on to the next game and let's see what he keeps doing. All right, so jumping into the very next game, he's going to end up having spear goblins in hand, so he's going to go cycle them right at the river, and his opponent ends up having bandit. So when you see bandit, you're thinking bridge spam or P.E.K.K.A. We're going to have to wait and see what Igor does. He's just going to drop a goblin gang. He ends up having rascals. He's not going to have that much of an issue. So this is pre-Barb Barrel nerf. You're probably not going to see Barb Barrel very often anymore, but Barb Barrel at this point is a very strong card at over 8,000 trophies just a couple days before the nerf. So Igor is going to be rocking it, and his opponent will be rocking it sometimes, but Igor will switch it off quite oftenly with Zap. So if you guys end up having Zap high level, just swap out the Barb Barrel for the Zap as soon as you end up having the balance changes hit. So Inferno Dragon coming down, also Ice Golem, so Inferno Dragon can easily get distracted by a whole bunch of bait, but obviously his opponent ends up having double small spell and a very fast cycle with Magic Archer, so this is going to be a tough matchup. Whenever we end up seeing Magic Archer placed at the river, it's going to be very hard for Igor to kill it if he doesn't end up having Barb Barrel and cycle, and quite often the Barb Barrel just will not be enough to kill it because his opponent will end up blocking it at this level. At over 8,000 trophies, these people really just don't make too many mistakes at all. And Igor is going to have to fireball the Magic Archer every single time. So if you guys want to take something away from this, Igor really tries to defend the maximum amount of damage so that his opponent can never like get one connection with the bandit and then the game's over. So if this Magic Archer comes down, I assume we're going to get a fireball immediately. He's not going to wait around. He's not going to dally and go and trap like rascals right on top of that. He's like, okay, that's a significant threat. We're not going to eat more than a couple hits, and we're fireballing that as soon as possible. So Bat's coming down as well. And I don't know how Igor is going to win this right now because he's activated King Tower. His opponent has already got King Tower activated with the snowball, so that was really unfortunate for him. Inferno Dragon is coming down on the right-hand side, and I would assume that Igor is probably going to have to go in for like a lot of minor chip to win this game, and he's always going to have to fireball that Magic Archer. That's a lot of chip value for a fireball, but he just didn't have it in cycle. His opponent took advantage of that. Obviously, at this level, your opponent is going to take advantage when you don't have cards in cycle. They know how to count cards and elixir, so very well played from his opponent. Goes in for a Mortar on offense here. He drops it on the left-hand side because if you think about it, his opponent ends up having a lot of damage on the right-hand side. He doesn't want a Magic Archer to come down right in the middle of the Mortar or any of his support units and then end up getting a lot of chip. So that's something that you have to be very fearful of when you're playing Mortar bait against someone that has Magic Archer. You cannot mess around with the Mortar placement on a tile where they can end up hitting the weaker tower because you're just going to accrue way more damage on you. So as a result, he is now starting to go in for the right-hand side after he's gotten a lot more damage there. And his opponent really can't go in for the Magic Archer because the Mortar would have just connected to the tower. He didn't actually have the amount of elixir to successfully defend everything there. So he's going to go for a fireball, and he actually ends up missing, unfortunately. So that was just really crazy how the Magic Archer was still shooting things that were completely irrelevant to it and did not walk up. So that is actually the first misplay from Igor today that we've seen, or the first big one there. And I guess you could call it the snowball one, dropping the miner in that precarious position, also a little bit of a misplay as well. But yeah, you don't see those too often. So he's going to drop a defensive Mortar. Let's see how he digs himself out of this hole. So typically, I know that myself in this situation, I would look at this and be like, oh my gosh, King Tower's activated. I've activated King Tower. How do I win this game? These are the games that you guys want to see probably. You guys don't really want to see how games go perfectly and then everything's extremely straightforward. It's nice to have this little bit of a mix where you're going to see how does he play in a tough time where he has to get a lot of damage. He's actually going to go for prediction fireballs on top of the Lumberjack because he needs to get more chip damage with the fireball. He's down still 700 damage in a hard counter matchup, and he's going to be going in for a Mortar very high. So that's something that I know is really good, but it's especially good against someone that ends up having Magic Archer bridge spam. So against bridge spam in general, it's really good because it limits their potential of getting a battle ram really close to your tower. Say it connects to the Mortar in the middle of the map, then the barbarians don't really have to walk as far. They literally just have half the distance to walk. But if it's in the middle, the Magic Archer cannot go and chip the Mortar and hit your towers. So very well played from Igor there. He's not dropping it like high up aggressively. He's just going to save it on defense at this point when he's down a little bit of tower damage left over, and he's going to go for fireballs immediately right on top, and thank God that Inferno Dragon not capture the tower. But yeah, he's just consistently using his Mortar on defense when times are tough, and then he's going in for a miner for his chip damage. So maybe that's something that you guys can start incorporating into your own gameplay. When you're down a lot, you probably just want to end up going for a miner cycle and playing defensive and potentially even drawing out the game. I think that that's probably Igor's mentality right now. He's like, okay, worst case scenario, I end up drawing this because I am dropping only defensive Mortars. I'm not allowing my opponent to break through, but the Spear Goblins lock on, and he's actually making magic happen. So in Bridge Spam Magic Archer matchup, I guess if they do not end up having a big spell, you really just want to end up going in for your Mortars in the middle, specifically not as much on offense, and then just miner cycle and win the game. He had a lot of success doing that, and this is at the top of the ladder against a very difficult matchup. So well played, Igor. Absolutely asserting dominance. Down and out. I really did not think he was going to be able to come back there, but he finds a way to come back. Fireball cycling on top of Lumberjacks just to push it away to get a little bit of extra chip damage from each miner interaction, and then also just dropping the Mortars in the middle was pivotal in securing that W. So let's move on to the next one, and let's see what Igor's got in store for us. So on to the next game. Igor's got a matchup against Faust out here. So Faust is rocking the dreaded Freeze Balloon deck. So guys, what we're going to see is we're going to see a lot of Mortars in the middle when he's identifying that his opponent is going to end up having Balloon. Because what ends up happening is if you drop a Mortar in the middle, you're going to be able to pull the Balloon that full distance away from your tower, make it travel a lot longer, and then you're going to be able to kill it before it reaches your tower. Especially against freeze players, you need to make sure that you space everything out so they don't get a completely amazing freeze off on you and hit the tower as well. Like, there could be a lot of issues if he's not able to space everything out correctly, and it's just going to be the main mechanism of him getting his offensive chip as well. Whenever his opponent goes in for a balloon, it's going to be free chip damage with the mortar every single time. So we're going to see that shortly as soon as his opponent sauces out a balloon. Anyway, he played really aggressive at the start of the game because he ended up having Rascals and Cycle. You really won't see Egor play super aggressive unless he's going to end up having defensive answers to his opponent. Rascals and Mortar are going to be your best ways of dealing with anyone that's got P.E.K.K.A, Bridge Spam, or Bridge Spam in general. And if you don't end up having that, you can't pull Hog Rider. You can't really deal with Bandit pushes if they end up having Zap, Snowball, or Poison, or a lot of spells. So you need to end up having Rascals or Mortar and Cycle in a lot of situations at the start of the game if you're going to play really aggressive. So yeah, he had one of the best hands possible at the start of the game. He ended up having Bats, Spear Goblins, Mortar, and Rascals, so he could pretty much do whatever he wanted. Goblin Gang is going to go in Cycle right now, so he's going to end up seeing Mega Minions. He saw Goblin Cage. I mean, this is a pretty interesting deck from his opponent. One of the best cards in the game right now is the Goblin Cage, and I'm kind of surprised that it didn't get a nerf. It's got a ridiculously high win rate, and we're going to have to see how he combats this, because every single time the Goblin Cage dies, which is distracting the Mortar right now, it's going to also go towards the Mortar, and it will probably kill it if he doesn't have anything to kill the Goblin Cage. So that's going to be a lot of licks for having to be spent by Egor. He's going to end up going for Rascals. His Mortar's not in Cycle immediately, so he actually has to Fireball on defense against the Balloon. So that's another thing that you guys want to take away from this. If you did not know the interaction, you can Fireball Balloon, and if there's nothing else distracting the tower from hitting the Balloon, Fireball plus a tower hits on top of the Balloon only allows death damage from the Balloon. So the Balloon will not actually get a connection onto you if there's nothing else distracting your tower from shooting the Balloon. So say there's like no Ice Golem or anything else around it, or your tower's not hitting Bats. So if you guys need to bounce back the Balloon with Fireball, you don't have to spend anything else if you just end up using a Fireball and the tower is shooting the Balloon fully. So it's a very good interaction there. He's actually going to go and Fireball the Balloons, and the Spear Goblins on the left-hand side are able to chip away on it. And you guys are just going to notice how Egor just staggers out his units really, really well. Rascals weren't hit there by the Death Bond. He's always making sure that he's keeping alive his units, and he's just consistently going for minor chip damage. That's what you're going to end up having to do when your opponent ends up having Balloon Freeze, right? If you end up going in for a whole bunch of Mortars on offense and you don't end up having an appropriate card cycle with, let's say, Fireball or Rascals and Bats, like if you end up cycling things incorrectly, you're going to lose the game. So the easiest way of playing this matchup is keeping your Mortar in Cycle if your opponent ends up having Balloon, or if you can play really aggressive and not give them an opportunity to go in for the Balloon for like this instance, right? There's no way that Foss can actually afford to go in for Balloon because Egor is demanding such a presence right here. But if you guys are lesser experienced with Mortar, you generally want to be saving the Mortar in Cycle. It's the same concept as like where you're running Graveyard and you poison on offense and you know that your opponent is not going to end up having like any way of cycling back to their bait or playing really aggressive on you. You can go in for that poison and you're going to be in a good spot. But if you do that like really aggressively and you overcommit, you could end up losing the game because your opponent will be able to punish you opposite lane really, really hardcore. So it's the same concept here. Egor is realizing I'm going to be able to just apply so much aggression that my opponent's not able to drop a Balloon on me and I'm going to be fine. So it's really cool to see that in action, and if you guys get to this level, I'm sure as you guys play the deck more and more, you're going to get more comfortable and you recognize these situations. He applied aggression in a calculated situation where he knew that his opponent could not punish him, therefore he was able to actually get away with a Mortar on offense there. That's a very high level tactic there. That's not something that most people would be able to recognize. So he's going to end up going in for Rascals on defense. He's consistently cycling them in the back because he's realized his opponent doesn't have a big spell to come at him. So there's no way that he's going to get Fireballed or poisoned or whatever. He's just doing so well right now. He's stacking up as much as he wants, and he's consistently going in for the minor chip damage. As you guys saw, there was one opportunity for him to go in for the Mortar the entire time. And the other times he's just been like, yo, I'm just going to play safe. I'm just going to go in for Fireballs. I'm going to go in for Minors, and now I only need one Minor hit, one Mortar connection, or I want to end up going in for a Fireball or a Zap, and I got the game. So if you guys notice where the Mortar was at the very end, that's where you want to be dropping it every single time. The tile closer to the way the Balloon is targeting, and it's going to be in the middle, but it's always going to be facing the Balloon. So whichever side they're going towards, you're going to be having that Mortar facing that side. It chips away on the tower, and it makes the Balloon travel the longest possible distance. So let's go move right on to the next game, and let's keep learning. So the very next matchup is going to be against our Shadow, one of the very best graveyard players on ladder. This guy's in the top of the world running a deck that I lose against every single time I play it when I play against a good player. I want to see what Egor does here because this is one of the hardest matchups for me in particular, and I assume a lot of other Mortar bait players. One of the things that I know that you have to do is you end up having to drop your Spear Goblins or Goblin Gang really far behind your King Tower, and the reason behind that is it gives your opponent less time to easily poison everything. So they're gonna have to wait a little bit, and then they're gonna be like, oh man, I have to wait a couple extra seconds, and those couple extra seconds will allow the Spear Goblins to chip away and decrease the duration and the potential of damage from that graveyard. So that's gonna be one thing that we're gonna see Egor do. We're gonna have to see what his spacing is. I wanna see if he's gonna be dropping Mortars on defense or Rascals on defense against all of the Bowlers and Baby Dragons and Electro Wizards coming at him and supporting the graveyard. I also assume in this matchup he's going to play really aggressive because I know when you hit double elixir it's just going to be really bad. So let's see what he does. He has a Bowler and an Ice Golem coming at him. You see Bowler and Ice Golem, you're like, oh man, that is not what I wanted to see. You got two phenomenal tanks coming at us, and I don't think my Mortar's ever breaking through. Anyway, he's going to end up going for a Miner in a spot that is not going to be Tornado Bolt, and he's going to go for a Zap on top of the Electro Wizard, one more hit, and that Electro Wizard ends up dying. So it's just nice to end up getting that damage early on. A little bit of extra Zap damage on the tower. He goes in for Goblin Gang just to make sure that Electro Wizard does not get one little snag on top of him. So he's going to end up going for Rascals on defense, so he doesn't go in for the offensive Mortar there, and I assume he ends up going for Spear Goblins in the back. So notice that placement of the Spear Goblins, guys. That is what I was talking about earlier on. I actually learned that from Jewel, one of the very best Three Musketeer players in the entire world. He consistently did that with Goblin Gang. And what that does is it takes a little bit longer for your Goblins, your Spear Goblins specifically, to walk up, and then the Spear Goblins are chipping away at the Goblins or the Skeletons, and then your opponent is going to be very sad if they're running Graveyard. So consistently going in for minor chip damage, because as we talked about before, it's incredibly difficult to get a Mortar through your opponent when they end up having a Bowler, when they end up having an Ice Golem. It's just not happening if they have it in cycle, to be honest. So he's going to consistently go in for more Miners. He's not even fearsome about the Tornado, because yes, his opponent could go in for the Tornado here, but Egor would love his opponent to go in for the Tornado there, because his opponent already dropped Baby Dragon, Bowler, and those units will die. If you Tornado, you're not going to have enough elixir for the graveyard, and you're not going to have elixir for the poison, and then your supporting units are not going to be able to do anything because you have no graveyard at all. So it's going to be the most flimsy push ever. If you go in for Miners in situations where your opponent can't afford to Tornado, or if they do Tornado, they're going to be in a really bad spot, that is the most ideal predicament for them to be in. So right now, we end up seeing a lot coming out of Egor. He went in for Rascals up high, and that's something that I love. You guys are consistently seeing him going for Rascals up high, and he's not allowing his opponent to have a tank for the graveyard then. If he ends up stopping everything from crossing the river, his tower is going to be shooting the Skeletons and aiding his endeavors with the Spear Goblins in the back. So he loves going Spear Goblins or Goblin Gang in the back. He loves stopping his opponent's units from crossing the river. And then he always likes to shut down his opponent's potential of maximum damage. So Spear Goblins again. Rascals are going to be tanking. The Baby Dragon is coming through. He has to Mortar because he has to redirect the Boulder and the Baby Dragon. And then when it's redirected, he ends up dropping a Goblin Gang. You're such a crafty fellow, man. That is absolutely absurd. So he ends up using the Goblin Gang on defense, Spear Goblins on defense, and he's using the Mortar as an HP shield, and the Mortar actually ends up getting some extra connection as well. So I really love how Egor played that. Typically did not use his Mortar on offense unless he was using it on defense at the same time. So you guys saw that against Balloon, but it's also true in Graveyard because it's not breaking through the Ice Golem and the Bowler. You have to wait for your opponent to use the Bowler on offense. Then when the Bowler is coming through and the Baby Dragon is maybe going to lock onto your tower and you don't have Rascals in cycle, sauce out that Mortar, and as soon as the Bowler dies, you're going to get another connection on the tower and finish off the game. Very well played by Egor. We saw how it turned into a minor cycling fight at the end, and I was just incredibly impressed. So a huge shout out to Egor for showing us this high level gameplay. Make sure to go drop him a follow. His links will be down below in the description of the video and in the pinned comment. And if you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure to sauce out a fat thumbs up on the vid so I know to continue the series. And right now I'm actually considering doing a Mastering Mortar series where I break down the top players' pro tips and tricks in these difficult matchups that they somehow end up winning every single time. So if you guys want to see that as a reoccurring series on the YouTube channel, make sure to let me know down below in the comment section. And if you're one of the few that watches to the very end of this video, I appreciate you a ton. Thank you guys, and I hope you have a fantastic day. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.